Good evening. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to our first ever February Hangout. And we've only been doing them since last October, so of course it's our first ever February. Tonight we have a whole cast of characters. We've got Suzanne King and Kelly Johnston and Jennifer Moser. And Emily Murray and myself, Christina Evans. And we're going to be looking tonight at how a change in the administration can potentially impact your Amazon business. Jennifer is an expert in international trade, having managed Amazon's North American trade compliance team. And Suzanne is an expert in product compliance, having managed compliance for Williams-Sonoma, Bureau Veritas, and most recently, food safety compliance at Amazon. Kelly, as many of you know, is an expert at seller performance, having managed seller performance at Amazon and worked in the department for 7 of her 9 years at Amazon. And Emily, also, as you know, is an expert in 5-star customer service, having worked in customer service and product safety, customer complaint investigations at Amazon. Okay, so we're going to do a round table real quick, round robin. Everybody say what you do when you're launching new products so you can really get an idea of the roles and steps. Go. Emily first.
Okay. So I'm a coach. So I help clients accountable to their project plan, which is benchmarking, regulatory, safety, and quality concerns. And also for profitability. Once the product seems reasonably profitable, then we move to the which is handled by our and chosen actual testing.
Did we get that? Did everybody get that? That cut out quite a bit. So real quick to recap, Emily's a coach. She keeps clients accountable. Keeps the projects moving in forward motion, basically any quality concerns for profitability, helps with the sourcing process, all that kind of stuff. So sorry it cut out there, but I just want to reiterate a little bit of what you said. Okay, who next?
I'll go next. Let me do a sound check though. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
You sound much better.
Oh, good. I've just switched to a headset with a microphone. So I do compliance and testing. And testing can be raw materials, it can be prototypes of products, it can be actual production items. All of testing basically happens in a lab, and I mean third-party lab. We don't own any labs, but there are a number of different labs we use. And then separate from that, a lot of Amazon sellers who come to us mix up what testing and inspection activities are. And inspections are a slightly different thing. They're done on site at the factory and might include basic tests, but a lot of tests are done in the laboratory with lab testing equipment. And when something passes testing and inspection, it can be shipped. Christine, I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Are you hearing that?
Nope.
Okay, must just be my headset. Who's next?
I'm getting a lot of feedback. Good.
What was that? And now segueing into Jennifer.
Somebody listening said that the sound has an echo. We do have quite a bit of us. If we can all just mute our mics in between, it might be a little stilted tonight just because we have so much sound going on, but we'll try to make this better for everybody that's listening.
So let me go next. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my name is Jennifer, and I do all the trade compliance and logistics coordination for Cascadia. Basically, what that boils down to is how do you get your goods across the border? How do you vet them for duties and tariffs that are applicable on your import? How do you make sure that you have a customs bond on file with the appropriate customs agency in the country that you're importing into? And how do you know that your products are in compliance with other government agencies, such as like Fish and Wildlife or Food and Drug Administration, all of those additional layers on regulation when you import products. And then when it comes time to ship, I can get you freight quotes. I can help you with your entry paperwork. I can make sure that you have properly vetted some of the preferential trade programs, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, wherein if you ship from certain countries, you can get lower or no duty applied to your goods at the time of import. So that's the small nutshell, I guess, on what I do.
Small, no.
Small nutshell.
And last but not least, I am the person that helps you stay on top of all of the voluminous Amazon policies that you have to know to make sure that as you're launching, you are not falling into the traps that a lot of new sellers do, which is they don't know what they don't know, and that gets them in trouble. So one of the most common is new sellers want to boost their products because their products are brand new, they're hot, they're awesome, and they start doing free reviews, giveaways like, here, take this product, give me a review, please. And no, you can't do that. Or they might have non-compliant review requests, like you're totally allowed to ask, but you're kind of trying to drive them towards positive reviews versus honest feedback. Or, and this happens too, non-compliant inserts and packaging. If you have questions about Amazon policy in regards to a product, I'm the one that helps put the brakes on any ideas that you get that you think are also awesome, but could get your products turned off or worse, your account.
So basically, everybody on board are experts. So thank you for being here tonight, everybody. There were a lot of campaign promises during this last political season for how Donald Trump was planning on helping American workers. And two big topics were tariffs and deregulation. Since we are a compliance and policy-focused company, you might imagine there's a bit of natural trepidation in response to any attempts to deregulate. Let's start with Jennifer. I'm going to pretend that I am an unknowing seller. So I'm pretending tonight that I don't know anything about what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So what does a proposed 20% tariff on Mexico mean for American consumers? Like the Cliff Notes version, because I don't understand tariffs at all.
Yeah. All right. Well, a 20% tariff on Mexico. Let me just start. There's two sort of proposals in the pipeline. One is to sort of sanction Mexico in a way, and then the other is to get rid of NAFTA altogether. Before I get into those two sort of topics, I want to just back up a minute and say that there's a few terms that maybe we need to define. So let's just start with what's an importer of record. So the importer of record would be any, let's say, buyer in the U.S. We're just going to say for the U.S. For the sake of this analogy. So a buyer in the U.S. that's responsible for importing the goods, and they're going to be on the paperwork as the legal owner of the goods, the first legal owner of the goods. So that's your importer of record. They'll be responsible for the customs paperwork. They'll be responsible for paying any duties and taxes, and they'll be responsible for any compliance problems that could arise. So that's your importer of record. They're a big deal. Who's your consignee? Your consignee is basically the first person, usually the importer of record, the buyer, the consignee, they're all the same. Sometimes the consignee can be the first person that physically takes possession of the goods. So sometimes that gets confused with being Amazon, but they are not always the consignee on your paperwork. It's a fine difference. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but the importer of record really has the most liability here. A couple of other terms that we want to define are, let's talk about Incoterms or terms of sale. These can be used sort of interchangeably. They're not exactly the same, but it's basically where in the supply chain you as the importer of record, you take possession of the goods. So say you buy from a manufacturer in Mexico and they're responsible to get it all the way across the border and into a fulfillment center in Texas, and then you take it from there. your Incoterms would be like deliver duty paid, or say you bought from somebody in China, and they're responsible to get it on the boat, and you're responsible from the boat all the way over to Amazon. That would be FOB China port. So there's a lot of terms flying around. But those are sort of the basics of what you need to know as far as responsible parties in the chain, and then what Incoterms are, because they're really important as far as at what point you become responsible for the goods. So let's turn back around to what does it mean for Donald Trump, and specifically we're talking about, I think, Mexico right now, but I think Canada applies. So if he were to impose a 20% tariff on Mexican goods, basically what he would be doing is getting rid of NAFTA. Now, NAFTA has been North American Free Trade Agreement. So goods that are manufactured in Mexico and or Canada are allowed to be imported free of duty. So it really incentivizes the US to buy from those countries. So a 20% tariff would mean that automatically we would have to pay 20% more for the same goods that we receive today. It would do away with preferential trade agreements. And there's actually been a lot of economic engineering around getting goods in a pre-manufactured state into Mexico or to Canada and having them finally transformed. That's the definition of manufactured in this scenario. Transformed, going through a significant transformation in that country. So the importation of raw goods into Mexico, I would think, would decline. This is just prediction. The assembly, when you see those tags on your clothes or any products that say, you know, assembled in Mexico, that kind of stuff would decrease because there would be no incentive anymore. The US could source goods from other countries. Now, there's other trade agreements that are out there. So the Philippines, emerging markets, Africa has like a African trade agreement. Maybe we'd be incentivized to buy goods from there now because they could be 20% cheaper off the bat. There's a lot of implications around it.
So a tariff is kind of like an indirect sales tax that a consumer pays on an imported good.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. I'll let you keep talking. Sorry.
It's a long explanation to say it's a sales tax.
Okay. Which sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like by raising tariffs in Mexico, that Mexico pays. But what you're saying is that tariffs actually cause consumers to behave differently than that.
Yes. So you would think that Mexico pays, but it's really the people that are buying the goods from Mexico that pay. So,
yes. Sorry, I thought you were going to expound. That is interesting. So well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it is, and it sounds to me like theoretically, if you're trying to sell on Amazon Mexico, for instance, and the borders start closing up in terms of trade between US and Mexico, it could be harder to import into Mexico as well, and harder to choose authenticity on Amazon, which is a huge focus this year.
Right. That all was theoretical, although I know I learned a lot about how trade works, so thank you, ladies. One of the most common effects of going to Republican government is deregulation. What does that mean, Suzanne? What do they mean by deregulation?
Well, it's not really deregulation as such, because that would mean the rolling back of existing laws. And that doesn't usually happen that much between political administration changes. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yep.
Okay. It's more rather that funding gets cut, and the agency that's supposed to be governing a particular regulation suddenly loses half its people, and they don't have the resources anymore to enforce the law. But what I think usually happens in changes in administration happens at a state level. And I'm going to be watching the states that swung from having been Obama states in the past to being Trump states now, because those are the ones where we're more likely to see changes, because particularly with chemical regulations in the US, and I don't mean like buying barrels of chemicals, I mean the chemicals that go into toys, into cosmetics, electronics, lawn furniture, just you name it. There's chemicals in all of those things. And as a country, the US has never had a very good chemical policy compared to Europe or Japan. The whole EU has pretty well-defined federal policies on what chemicals are allowed and not allowed in products. And same with Japan, same with many other countries. But the US, we leave it up to the states. And so we tend to have a patched together hodgepodge of state regulations, some covering chemicals, some covering only hazardous chemicals, some covering them only for children's products. And then there's 3 states, Maine, Washington, and Illinois, that regulate chemicals in just children's products, but they have different definitions of what a children's product is. So, for example, if you have shampoo with a picture of Dora the Explorer on it, the state of Washington would say, oh, that's a children's product. But the federal government wouldn't agree with that. And Illinois would say it's not a children's product. So it can be really complicated if you're in the retail sector trying to do the right thing and also not get your product seized, and also meet the regulations. So it's going to be kind of an interesting time to watch and see. And with multiple state regulations, it'd be nicer to have one federal law that supersedes all the state regulations, and we do have a number of those. But it's still kind of a patchwork, and so this could be, over the next year or so, we might see some unfolding of state laws.
So again, I'm hearing something completely counterintuitive. By decreasing regulation and enforcement at a federal level, regulatory complexity is actually increased?
Yeah. That happens. You see the same thing with sales tax at Amazon, for instance. Amazon's long been a proponent of having a single federal sales tax policy because it's so complicated if you're in the e-commerce space to manage so many jurisdictions, because you're not always managing just state jurisdictions, but city or county jurisdictions for some regions. So one single federal policy is actually much simpler to manage if you're a company trying to sell a product. There's also a tendency to put new rulemaking or rule reviews on hold. There is a gag order recently. I wish now I paid more attention to it when I saw it in the paper. I think it was last Friday in the New York Times that the Trump administration had put a gag order on the FDA and the USDA to not issue any new press releases. And I read that and I thought, what the heck? Because I've worked in food compliance for, gosh, the last 3 years that I was at Amazon. And we relied on the press releases coming from the USDA, FISIS, or the FDA to announce any food poisoning instances. This chicken plant has salmonella and there's 30,000 pounds of frozen chicken that have been released to these supermarkets. If you have them in your freezer, please discard this right away, take the following measures, blah, blah, blah. So if they're putting out a gag order on those press releases, how can the public be notified of safety risks? I thought that was really interesting. And I wondered if that was a precursor to an unwinding of other regulations for those particular agencies. Typically, the way the rules are made is that they're developed in a committee and then announced to the public, and there's always a period of comment, and then the comments get evaluated and the rule gets amended or gets put on hold or passed without an amendment. I mean, that's why it took over 20 years to get a new federal toy law passed, because it kept going into committee and there'd be a review period, and the sides arguing for different cases just couldn't come to agreement until later in the 2000s decade. So because anybody in the public has a right to comment, typically new rules proposed by independent agencies in the executive branch. That's the only place where they happen. If there's a moratorium on any new rules, then effectively new regulations don't move forward. So that'll be an interesting space to watch, particularly in the consumer product sphere.
Christina, did we lose you?
She's on mute.
What I was saying.
Where did our MC go?
Pretending I don't know anything, but it sounds like there's a lot of speculation, but only a few actually concrete moves around specific agencies like the EPA, FDA, and USDA.
Yeah, I don't know how much more we'll see. It will be unlikely, for example, that the CPSA regulation gets rolled back, because it had strong bipartisan support when it was going through Congress under George Bush. And the majority of the law is to protect children. And so most voters and most legislators don't want their name attached to child safety regulation that goes away and then shortly after children die for such safety issues. So I'd be surprised if that unrolls very much.
Can you explain a little more about what you mean by protecting children? I've seen, well, our team talks a lot about CPSA, and for those that are unclear on what it actually includes, can you expound on that?
Yeah, it's a big acronym, and a lot of people think that C means children, because a lot of that law is about child's legislation, but it stands for consumer. CPSA means Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. And it was a big piece of legislation that was the first consumer safety law since the CPSA was founded in the late 70s. And so it's probably 3/4 of that law associated with children's products. But the other quarter is a broad variety of dangerous consumer goods, everything from refrigerators. There's rules around refrigerators and to protect children from crawling into them in abandoned buildings, for instance, or garage door openers. The automatic ones now need to have safety features on those so people don't get crushed under a garage door. Those are the kinds of things that are also rolled into the CPSIA. And then I just lost my train of thought. So 75% of the law really is focused on children's stuff, and it's been big. Actually, next week will be the 4th anniversary for when that law became firmly enacted. I mean, it went back and forth and back and forth in the courts for about 3 years with different factions contesting what the rules would require. But 4 years ago now, just about, they firmly said testing is required on juvenile products. And of course, that's a little bit of a gray area, but it's basically anything for a child 13 and under. And the other category they legislate is durable nursery products, such as cribs and bassinets and car seats and the things that are used with infant children. So basically, to me, the earth-shaking change in that law was that it requires all those juvenile products to be tested in a third-party lab. It can't be tested in a manufacturer's own lab. It has to be a third-party impartial lab, and a report has to be issued. And so by raising that standard across the board for all children's products, it's really improved safety quite a bit. And to me, more importantly, it's improved chemical exposure. Over the last several years, I've seen what you see sold in a dollar store change dramatically because the lead, the cadmium, the phthalate laws that are now required prohibit those items from being sold. So the products out there are much safer, but there is a sort of burden of compliance to make sure that you're doing the right thing when you're importing a product, particularly from offshore.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about being careful. Having worked on the product safety team at Amazon, we regularly were unable to get compliance documentation proving that products were safe. We would regularly ask for that from sellers, and it would not be forthcoming. Usually vendors would have it, the bigger sellers, but sellers didn't seem to have the basic things like the ETL certification that goes with their electric product or product testing data that should go with pretty much everything. We actually really struggled on some of these because employees at Amazon really wanted to try and help sellers and vendors to succeed and be successful. And we didn't really think that there was necessarily anything shady about what they were doing. But you know, there's often not enough time to build a case for them. And also customers always come first, always. And if you don't have the stuff, you don't have the stuff. And that then puts the liability on Amazon, which the whole point of product safety is to mitigate liability where that's concerned. So if it came down to preventing a seller from listing or potentially harming a customer, Amazon's always going to protect the customer. That's always the direction we would go.
Yeah, and that's always been one of the best things about Amazon to me, in my experience, and I know in probably everybody else here on the call, is that the overall trend towards doing the right thing. And there are always individual examples of what doesn't happen. And I see a lot of those working on suspensions, sadly. But overall, Amazon's trying to do the right thing. They're trying to protect customers. They're trying to protect the customer experience. And I think a lot of our clients are trying to do the same, and that's really heartening. And I feel very good about the overall direction that all that's going in 2017. But yeah, Amazon tries to do that.
I sincerely appreciate all of you being here tonight. We didn't have a ton of questions in the chat, but that was a lot of information, a lot of complicated information. So I appreciate you sharing your brains with us. For those watching live or those watching the replay, again, that is a lot of information, and we don't expect when people come to us, we don't expect them to know all of those rules and the compliance policies and what certifications you need. That's what Cascadia was founded on. We want to be able to provide those type of services for you. So if you're thinking about developing a product or importing a product, or you're having issues with a product and you're not quite sure where to start, think Cascadia. That's our hashtag, think Cascadia. You can always check in on our website, on our services. Our blog has a ton of information in regards to compliance and how you can protect yourself. www.thinkcascadia.com. You can always email us directly at info@thinkcascadia.com. And you can also call us 206-202-0222. We love doing these every week, and we love your feedback. So if you ever have a subject you want us to talk about, any kind of trending topic, any specific questions, you can always message us, post a comment on the YouTube channel, subscribe, learn some things, enjoy, and we'll see you again next week on Thursday. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.